Texas's workforce. They teach us. They inspire us. They take us to new heights. They make the things that make our lives better and open doors to a brighter tomorrow. These aren't just workers doing a job. They're people doing a job well. They keep Texas running, and that matters to you, and it matters to us. We're Texas Mutual Insurance Company, the state's #1 workers' comp provider. Every day, we're on the job with 1.5 million Texas workers. And every day, we have the same goal, getting each and every one of them home safe to their families. With safety resources, training technologies, dividends, and a total commitment to service, Texas Mutual is changing the way workers' comp works for you.
Hi everyone, welcome to day 2 of the Texas Soccer Summit presented by the Striker Texas. My name is John Arnold and I'm excited to lead off today's series of panels with a panel on making soccer matter in a football-loving state. We're going to get into marketing and how the clubs in the state of Texas are reaching the fans, making sure that they're relevant in their markets, making sure that they're reaching the people who are interested in them, and making sure that fans are in the stands when pandemic permits. And eventually the people that are being reached online are turned into true fans. We know that this is a soccer-loving state. Dallas Cowboys, Friday Night Lights. The history is clear that American football is priority #1 in Texas, but at least at the Striker Texas, we believe that this is a soccer state as well. So how do those clubs make sure that fans who tune into college and pro games on Saturday and Sunday are also tuning into their local soccer matches? That's what we're going to talk about. And we have a fantastic panel to discuss, debate, and chat. The 3 people with me today are Zach Emmons. He's the Vice President of Marketing Communications with the Houston Dynamo. Before he worked in soccer, Zach, you spent a decade in the NFL, had time with the Raiders and the Texans, and also worked in NASCAR. So excited to get your perspective on all things soccer, football, and everything in Texas. Zach, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, John. Looking forward to it.
We're also joined by Sarah Nollner out on Mountain Time in El Paso. She's the Director of Marketing Communications with the El Paso Locomotive. Before she joined Locomotive, she worked with MLS and Soccer United Marketing and also helped Club Tijuana develop some of their U.S. marketing efforts. Sarah, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. And last but not least, it's James Ruth in Austin. He's the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Austin FC, worked with Major League Soccer on the partnership side, did a lot of things with EMLS, if I'm not mistaken. James, thanks for being with us today. Looking forward to your perspective as well. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm glad to have you guys here and looking forward to this discussion. As I mentioned, and as you guys saw on the pre-roll, this panel, this hour of the Texas Soccer Summit is brought to you by the Texas Mutual Insurance Company. They're the state's #1 workers' comp provider, serving 70,000 policyholders and protecting more than 1.5 million Texans on the job each day. Texas Mutual focuses exclusively on workers' comp coverage for Texas businesses. Their mission is to provide a strong foundation for businesses that rely on them, take care of Texas's workforce, and building stronger, safer communities. Thanks to Texas Mutual for sponsoring this hour of the panel. Let's get into it, and this may be a strange way to start the panel, but I want to see if our panel is even framed in the right way, if we even have described this correctly, Zach. Because, I said, hey, it's making soccer matter in a football-loving state, and almost set up this kind of American football versus soccer dynamic, right? Is that really the case when you look at the challenges for marketing the Dynamo and the Dash there in Houston and in the broader Texas region? Is football an obstacle? Are they an opponent? How do you kind of see the two sports?
I think yes and no. I think from a fandom standpoint, I don't see it as an obstacle. I think it's an and relationship. I mean, certainly there's going to be football fans, American football fans, who don't care for soccer, and vice versa. I look at myself, and obviously professionally I spent a decade in the NFL. Like you said, I grew up watching football games, going to high school football games, but also grew up playing soccer, and that's my first love. So I think there's a lot of people in Texas like me who enjoy both of them. I think for James and Sarah and myself, from a professional standpoint, sometimes it can be a challenge getting eyeballs, getting attention from local media, some things that we have to work around. I mean, quick story I was thinking about yesterday as I was getting ready for this, when we introduced Wilmer Cabrera as our head coach a couple of years ago, the only day he could do a press conference was on a Friday. And I had to work around high school football coverage to make sure that Wilbur got covered locally, because we all know in Texas high school football is so important. So I think for us, it's being smart about how we position ourselves and when and where we make ourselves available, so that we're not asking people to choose when it comes to local media. But again, from a fandom standpoint, I think it's an and relationship.
What do you think, Sarah, and what have you seen in the El Paso market? There's not maybe the NFL team that there is in a Houston or a Dallas or UT, as I'm sure we'll chat about here with James in a second, but there is great interest, obviously, in American football and other sports in El Paso. How do you kind of see the relationship between the two sports out there?
I would completely agree with everything Zach said, is that it's definitely, it's an and relationship. You can be a American football fan and you can be a soccer fan. I think even though there's no professional team, and you think a lot of people think Texas is small, but we're 10 hours away from Dallas, but we still have, not small, but just El Paso's way out there. And so many Cowboys fans here. You can get busloads of people coming from El Paso to go to Dallas to see a game. So it is competing, I would say, with for media. Definitely high school football. We have UTEP here, which is a pretty big program in terms of everyone's fans here. So it is competing with that. You know, we have a lot of matches that kind of coincide with their Saturday matches as well, or Saturday games as well. So for us, it's kind of competing in the media space and creating a different story. I would say is that, you know, American football is tradition, it's history, it's what your family likes. And since we're a little bit newer here, I mean, we're going on to our third season, it's trying to create those traditions. So it's, you know, you want to tailgate before the match, you want to go to your pub club before. And so it is trying to take some of those traditions that I think live in El Paso, because it is a huge American football. Even you go to Juarez and you'll see, which is just across like 10 minutes away, you go over there and you see American football being played. So it's really interesting that it's coming from both sides of the border, and it's a very popular sport here. But it's just positioning yourself different, and then I think trying to make those relationships. So I mean, we have Aaron Jones and Alvin Jones from here, and Aaron had a huge year in Green Bay. So it's trying to make him a fan of the club and have him kind of speak on our behalf as well. So it's just trying to tie the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, you mentioned kind of telling the story in a different way and sort of making kind of the narrative of football be history, tradition, because you guys are a new brand in town. You know, really, when you think about it, James, obviously you've been doing a lot of kind of storytelling and crafting of kind of your narrative, you know, as Austin FC and what you guys represent in a market that traditionally has been dominated by UT, all things UT, but certainly the football team being the biggest representation. So it's a little bit different because you guys haven't kicked a ball yet, but how have you guys sort of positioned yourself, and how do you think about maybe the relationship with UT football?
Well, listen, I mean, we view UT and UT football as, you know, as a brother organization. I mean, they're an institution here in Austin, and we respect that. I think we, at the same token, have a huge opportunity to tread a new path for Austin. You know, we kind of boil it down to its most basic piece. You know, the value proposition and what we're delivering for Austin FC is the first time for Austinites to actually wear a jersey that says Austin on it, you know, and to have the whole narrative focused on this city rather than UT, which UT is University of Texas. And obviously it's centered here in Austin, but you've got UT fans and UT fandom spread out throughout the entire state, right? Maybe not quite in College Station or some other places, but you know, it is the de facto college club for a lot of Texas. And so to be able to just double down on Austin and live Austin's brand and be an embodiment for Austin's brand, that's really what we're focused on. And that transcends football and thinking about soccer versus football, and really gets down to the root of, you know, how do we become a flag bearer for Austin? Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but, you know, having that be our North Star, I think that totally redefines the conversation about how we look at ourselves, even in our own marketplace.
Where do you guys see sort of social media and traditional media falling in? Obviously, we started this project, the Striker Texas, trying to be a digital media brand and tell stories with kind of traditional methods in a way, articles, but also doing video content, doing conferences like these, doing all sorts of different sort of avenues. I'm sure as a club, Zach, you're trying to do the same thing and reach fans sort of where they're at, whether they're scrolling Instagram or Twitter, or they're still reading an old school newspaper. It's harsh to say, but like an old school newspaper like the Chronicle. So how do you kind of see that balance, and what kind of demographics are you looking to target to get Dynamo and Dash fans into the stadium and make sure that people are becoming fans of those clubs as much as they are of the Texans and the Astros?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, certainly traditional media is still very important. And I think the newspaper is still the traditional method, and there's still a lot of value in that. I still see what gets published in the Chronicle here locally drives coverage on TV and on radio still, whether it's us, the Texans, Rockets, whomever else. So we try to be as open as we possibly can for them, but certainly I think social media has democratized it so much in terms of the ability to reach the fan. We're not wholly dependent on the Chronicle or ABC channel or whomever else. So for us, I think it has given us the ability to own our story a little bit more. It's given us the ability, or the opportunity, I should say, to kind of position ourselves in a little bit more authentic way. You talk about demographics. I think for us, that's been a big point of focus over the last year. I mean, certainly we went through the whole rebrand from the logo you can see behind me to now the new one that I'm wearing. And more so than that, it was about redefining who we are as a club. And part of that was really looking at who we want to be. And not just kind of casting a wide net and trying to be all things to everybody, but really focusing in on that young professional 18 to 35 audience, be they soccer fans, football fans, basketball fans. That's where we see the most crossover, and trying to appeal to them. And I think secondly, from a content standpoint, what I see crossover and what I see really make an impact, especially in traditional media, is who our players are as men and as women. What makes them interesting people, not just what they do for a living. That I think has been the biggest door opener for us in terms of gaining new fans, is introducing the people and their stories, and then from there using that as a way to get people engaged with the team itself.
What about for El Paso, Sarah? I think of that as a different market. You're there on the ground reaching those people every day. But I think of it as a kind of different city than Houston. Houston's such a blend of different immigrant communities. El Paso, of course, with the close relationship with Juarez that you mentioned. I'm sure that presents some challenges as well as opportunity, right? You have FC Juarez right across the border, who maybe fans are already going to those games and watching Liga MX competition. Where do you guys kind of land on the social media versus traditional media, and taking those unique challenges for your market in mind?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Our ownership is part of FC Juarez as well, so there is definitely that synergy between us. I think for us, it's been interesting to kind of see that, we have a large Spanish-speaking population, but a lot of people consume our media in English. And so it's been interesting for us to kind of do that mix of realizing every post doesn't have to be English and Spanish. We can post something in English, and then we get a lot of interaction. It can be just even in a single thread between people, it's English, Spanish, English, Spanish. And so for me, it's just trying to realize that what we do needs to be organic and real and come across as how El Paso is. And I think I'm not from El Paso, but I've lived here for 4 years. And I think as we've kind of grown and seen what works and what doesn't work, that's how we have implemented it in traditional media as well as social media. I would say social media obviously is a huge thing for us because that's a population we want to get out here, but also traditional media, just because we are still trying to reach that family who has the option to go to the zoo, has the option to go to a Chihuahuas baseball game, which is also in our ownership group, and trying to figure out, hey, if you want this atmosphere, you go to baseball, or if you want this, or you're available on this Saturday, this is how a soccer match is going to be. And I think for us, it's also been interesting to see that while we have a lot of soccer fans in the region, we have huge fans of Liga MX, definitely Juarez, as well as Chivas, America, all of those teams. But there's affinity, but also the ability to purchase tickets and come to matches. And I think it's trying to engage our audience and realize, you're fans of these teams, and you have players who have played in leagues similar to Liga MX, even in Liga MX, right here in El Paso. So it's trying to get that affinity and bring them out to a game, because once we've seen that if you come out to a game, as we all know, is you want to come back. So I think for us is trying to make it known that we're in El Paso and that we have top tier talent, and it's just you can be a fan of Juarez, but trying to figure out how to make them engage with us and realize we're the local team that they can support.
It's interesting you bring up that sort of bilingual conversation that I think is very normal in El Paso and in most of our Texas cities, right? James, we actually spoke a couple months ago about Austin FC's strategy to sort of be intentionally bilingual, but not do, here's our Spanish account, here's our English account, and kind of blend. Can you talk to people who might not have had the chance to read that article I was able to write about Austin's strategy of bringing in Spanish speakers? And I would say unapologetically sort of putting Spanish right next to English with the kind of Verde Listo campaign. What went into those decisions, and what is your philosophy as a club on kind of that linguistic blend that we hear so often in Texas?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting thing. I think the club has done a good job so far of embracing all of Austin, right? And I think what's so interesting about this city, and I think a lot of people, everybody on this panel, we've got a huge Latino population in our respective towns. And not only is it that it's a huge demographic, but in Austin, we really feel like, it's part of the nature of this city. Even if you don't speak Spanish, maybe you have no ties to Mexico yourself, your family, or your personal culture. Given the fact that you live in Austin, you are imbued to some extent with Latino culture because it's Austin culture. And I think for us, that goes back to the core of what we're trying to build, which is an identity and a club that is truly representative of all of Austin. And so we've definitely made a conscientious decision to double down, not only linguistically in Spanish, but just also in our creative, how we present ourselves, to make sure that we are connecting with all the different components of this city that make Austin interesting. And I think for us, we've been really careful about how we've done it too. I think we've tried to not necessarily just go the Spanglish route and throw some Spanish into everything we do. We're trying to create identities and sub-brands for this club that may be in Spanish, but build meaning for everybody. That's what we talk about when we say Verde. Verde is our ethos as a club. That's what we want to imbue meaning in over time. We're not saying Verde because it's a Spanish word and we think that we capture the Latino audience by putting one word in Spanish. It's more about having an identity that feels multilingual, that feels of Austin, and doesn't really only represent one part of this city. And I think that's one of the major opportunities that we see for Austin FC, for all the kind of duality that exists in Austin. There aren't that many mediums to connect all the different communities that exist in this city, whether it's the more kind of first and second and third generation Latino audience, or the other kind of general market audience that exists in Austin. So we want to position ourselves as a connective device in the city to bring those communities under one umbrella to root and cheer on Austin's club. And so that's been kind of the conscientious thinking on making sure that that heritage, that perspective of Austin is always present in what we're doing outwardly with our fans. And it's something that we've seen good success and feedback with our core fans on. And so we're feeling really emboldened by it and the idea of doubling down on it.
Yeah, and
Zach,
John, if I can just jump in for a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. No, I just think what James was saying was spot on, and I think it's a lot of what we've been trying to do as well, from the standpoint that, the way we look at our content is our city is obviously multicultural, but very largely bicultural. Our club is very bicultural, bilingual. We want our voice to be bilingual and bicultural. We don't want it to be, you speak English, you go get your content over here. You speak Spanish, you get your content over here. It should be one content stream for everybody. We talked to our fans and surveyed them, and the thing that fans will tell us is they want good, authentic content, and the fan base that is bilingual will go where the best content is. Historically, traditionally, it's been Spanish language media has told the story better, so that's where people have gravitated towards. But if the story is told better in English and more authentically in English, they'll consume it there too. So it's on us to tell great stories and to be authentic in how we tell it, not just do Spanish content for the sake of having Spanish content or vice versa. Yeah. I think the other thing that we've talked about internally that kind of, it's probably a little inside baseball, I guess, but each of the platforms now is offering translation services. So the need to have a Spanish only or a French only or whatever only feed is lessened because the fan can get that information in their preferred language automatically as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach, I want to stay with you on that topic because, I've had the pleasure to cover several Dynamo games and it's always been a great experience, but also have done like Leagues Cup where Tigres was in town or CONCACAF Champions League where specifically Tigres, but, that Houston area, there's so many regios, there's so many people from Monterrey who live in Houston, who call Houston home, and they show up when their preferred team is in town, right? It seems to me from the outside looking in that it's been difficult to get those fans who hold those allegiances very tightly, who love Tigres, who love Monterrey, who love those clubs. It seems to be difficult to get them to also love the Dynamo. What do you guys do to make that happen? What do you guys do to not necessarily turn a fan from a Tigres fan to a Dynamo fan, but to do the thing we were talking about earlier where, I'm going to say I'm a Texas Tech Red Raider and a soccer fan because you guys are all UT on this panel. You got your Austin and you got your Longhorn behind you. But how do you make it that so that fan who is a Texans and a Tigres fan says, oh, yeah, I also want to buy a ticket and go see the Dynamo?
Yeah, certainly it's a very difficult nut to crack, and I think we can continue to do a better job of that here locally. To your point, there's such a deep fandom for so many teams in Houston. 2 years ago, we played Tigres here at BBVA Stadium in CONCACAF Champions League, and candidly, it was 80-85% Tigres fans. To an extent, I don't think you're going to convert that diehard fan. I think it was Cantona that said, you can change your car, you can change your house, you can even change your spouse, but you can never change your football club. So I think there is the opportunity, like Sarah was saying, to create that and relationship and be the team in your hometown. Some of that is, when we do have the opportunity to play Tigres or Rayados or whomever else, putting a good product on the field. Certainly you can only market to the extent that you have a good product. But for us, what we've seen is, in doing some of the market research, it's the most likely opportunity we have is not the first generation immigrant who moved over as an adult from Mexico perhaps and has Tigres in his heart. It's in research speak, it's kind of generation 1.5 and 2.0 that either moved here as a young kid or were born here, typically haven't quite given their heart away to a club yet, still feel a strong connection to their homeland, but are more open to engaging locally as well. And so not trying to convert the Tigres fan from Tigres to Dynamo, but maybe try to get that next generation to build their own fan base or fandom, with us in addition to the club their dad or grandfather grew up watching.
Yeah, and just to jump in, I think what Zach's saying is dead on. I think a lot of people from the outside looking in, because we're all, we're marketers here, so we have the easiest job for everybody else to replicate across the board, right? Everybody's got their opinions and all that sort of stuff. And I think, a lot of people come in and they say, Texas, Central Texas, Southern Texas, West Texas, man, how could you compete with Liga MX looking at the numbers? It's impressive the fan base that Liga MX has here. But like what Zach's saying, it's not mutually exclusive. Fandom is not mutually exclusive. And I think, MLS is going to win. We're going to win by being able to speak to what our unique proposition is with our fans, right? We are not going to win the game of trying to chase Liga MX fandom, not because of any sort of conversation around quality of product or experience or anything like that. It just comes down to personal connection, right? And the work that we have to do is, okay, great, inspiration by what, Tigres fans, their connection, especially first generation Latinos that are coming in from Mexico, their connection with that club is amazing. The passion that they have for Tigres is amazing. But you dig into that passion, and it's because they grew up there. They grew up with, that fandom being part of their maturation as a person. When I talk to a lot of our fans, a lot of them are Tigres fans. or Club America fans. And the narrative, and this is among our supporters, our hardcore fan base, and the narrative is always, my father is a Tigres fan, or I even, grew up in Monterrey, but I live in Austin now. I've been in Austin for 10 years, and I need a club that speaks to my reality as an Austinite, right? And who I am as a person. That's ultimately the thing at the end of the day. And, Zach, you're great to bring up the kind of database stuff, the kind of stats and figures that point us in the right direction and say, okay, we really need to dig into the second and third generation. And I think you'd agree, okay, then it's the next layer of, okay, how do we create connections, real connections with these people? Because ultimately that's what's driving fandom. Fandom isn't a demos game. It's understanding what's kind of created their fandom and how do we make sure that we create a similar connection with whether it's Austin FC or the Dynamo or whatnot. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I think it's all stuff that we should be emboldened by because there's a huge audience of second and third generation Latinos in Texas who are soccer literate and looking for a team that can have that same connection that they see with their father or their mother, or their grandfather, or grandmother with Club in Mexico. So it's a huge opportunity for us. We just need to be able to execute it the right way.
Yeah, and
Sarah, you mentioned.
I don't want to belabor the point, and sorry, John, but I think James and Austin have done a fantastic job. I know El Paso has done a great job as well. Is that something we're trying to do better is defining who you are as a club and what your identity is that gives people that connection. None of us are going to out Tigres. We're not going to out Bayern Munich. Or out Texans, the Texans out, so on and so forth. It's defining who you are as a club and giving people something that they know they can connect with. And then that's going to start to create that fandom. If we spend all of our time chasing the fan of somebody else, you never know who you are. And then I think it becomes just an empty shell at that point.
Well, and not to go super philosophical.
No, go ahead, James. Let's get philosophical. No, real quick. I do want to hear your philosophical take. Let's hear it.
Well, I think it speaks to something deeper within American soccer, which is we are on this threshold moment, and now is the time to be confident in ourselves, our brands, and what we're delivering to fans. And I think Zach's comment around don't chase is really well said. And the clubs that are going to be successful are the ones that know who they are out of the gate and aren't trying to chase to anybody else's expectations of what a club should or shouldn't be outside of their own fan, right?
Yeah. So, Sarah, I want to bring you in because, you have that unique relationship with FC Juarez right across the border and that unique borderplex. If I think that's what you guys call it.
Yep.
It's like, people are, I did a story on Santiago Munoz, who was born in El Paso, grew up in Juarez, and now he plays for Santos Laguna. Yeah, maybe he'll play for the U.S. or Mexico, playing for a Liga MX team, right? It's a very common story where he was crossing the border regularly to play soccer, right? Or to go shopping or any of those things. You also did work with Xolos, and I know we're in San Diego for a while where you can have the same experience where people work on one side or the other, they live on one side or the other. That has to be a unique challenge as well for you guys to market and sort of not, that Zach and James are saying don't chase. It has to be tough in a way because it could be easy to kind of chase after a certain kind of fan. What is the experience that you have in El Paso finding the core fans who make you guys successful even so early in your life as a club?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see this dynamic because there are your hardcore soccer fans that I personally know and I've gone to games with on both sides where they have season seats for FC Juarez and season seats for us. So they're going to go to soccer however they can find it. They'll go to those Mexican national team games in Dallas and they will go find the closest soccer match. So those are kind of I would say, our easy fans. They find you. And then there's going to be the FC Juarez fans who have started to get interested in our club because of we had a player on loan our first season, and then we signed two, I would say, some of their star players last year. Last year, as we all know, was a little bit interesting because we couldn't really see the immediate effect of people coming to the matches to see those fans, but on social media you can see those players. You can see that they're really intrigued in us. We get a lot of different fans commenting on social media when we post about those FC Juarez former players, and I think for us it's just trying to figure out how to get. They're going to be fans of anything that attaches to FC Juarez, and it's just trying to turn that into, yes, they were the Bravos player, but now they're a Locos player, and trying to get them to realize, like, now they wear the blue, they're not wearing the red and the green, and getting them to come out to our game and feel the passion. And it's never going to be like what you experience across the border in Juarez. It's going to be different, but it still has that atmosphere, and just trying to frame it a little bit differently, but then help people realize you have the access to this. You don't have to wait in line to cross the border. And it's going to be one thing, not to get too business related, but I mean, price is definitely a factor. And we all know if you've been to a Cholos game or a game in Mexico, you can get like 4 beers for the price of 1 beer, so it's kind of interesting to try to frame that and make people realize that, it is not going to be as cheap as it is over there, but it's a different product. And we play in a really amazing stadium downtown. It's also the baseball stadium. And I think, I don't know if this is the time to get into it as well, but also there's some problems that we face playing in a really well-built stadium for baseball with a really amazing baseball team. I think the Chihuahuas have made a name for themselves, and so they came in here, I guess it's been 8 years ago, and if you're from El Paso, you're proud to be the Chihuahua. You see the Chihuahuas logo anywhere you go, and you're like, El Paso, and it stands for that. So it's been interesting to try to coincide along that, especially when we're playing in the same stadium.
Tell me more about that, Sarah. And first of all 3 of you have made comments like, I don't want to get too in the weeds, I don't want to get philosophical. That is the point of this panel. So you guys feel free to get as deep as you want to, as inside baseball, as in the weeds as you want to. You feel free to dig in. Sarah, tell me more about the challenges and benefits. You said, it's a beautiful venue. It's downtown, which a lot of teams, I'm sitting here in Dallas, like FC Dallas. I think they like their stadium, but I think they would have loved to be downtown, right, and be walkable and accessible to a larger group of people. So it sounds like there's some benefits from that facility, but it was built for baseball, right? So what are some of the challenges on your side, the marketing side, of playing in a venue that was purpose-built for a different purpose?
Yeah, there's, I would say it's, first of all, that stadium is tied to baseball. You think of, we play at Southwest University Park. Isn't that where the Chihuahuas play? And so Chihuahuas are very, very well known in this town, and everyone knows the stadium. And so it's trying to communicate that it's also our home. I have kind of had a thing when we first started where baseball calls their stadium a ballpark, but whenever I refer to it, it's a stadium. So I would say, do push-ups if you say ballpark. So it's just trying to get your minds, everyone's minds, into like, we play at a stadium. It's maybe a ballpark to some people, but for us, it's a stadium. I think on the marketing side, and I would say ticket sales side is, trying to reconfigure seating manifestations that fit a soccer fan, because, you have baseball, you want to be behind home plate. That is the most amazing seat in the facility. But for soccer, we have these second tier that for a soccer fan is amazing. You can see the play develop, you can see everything happening on the field, and trying to kind of communicate that when we're selling tickets and telling fans, hey, we don't have behind home plate open, but we do have some excellent seats in the second tier. It's just communicating differently and making it feel like a soccer stadium. And we've been really lucky to have the ability to change signage over when we play, and we have some really great turf that comes in, and it's just trying to make it seem like it is a soccer stadium has been pretty interesting to do. But there are challenges, but I think we have a really excellent supporters group who we managed to fit in behind, right behind the goal. So I think finding areas that really kind of play up the soccer feel is what's kind of helped us a lot.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about making soccer matter in a football-loving state, the first of several panels today as part of the Texas Soccer Summit presented by the Striker Texas. This hour's panel is presented by the Texas Mutual Insurance Company. That's the state's #1 workers' comp provider, serving 70,000 policyholders and protecting more than 1.5 million Texans on the job each day. Texas Mutual focuses exclusively on workers' comp coverages for Texas businesses. Their mission is to provide a strong foundation for the businesses that rely on them, take care of Texas's workforce, and build a stronger, safer community. We're talking about facilities, and Zach, of course, Houston has a lovely stadium in what I would say is a great location, an interesting neighborhood. COVID, of course, has affected how kind of all neighborhoods, I think, grow and operate, but a sort of bustling area there, Edo and East Downtown. What are the challenges or benefits that you guys have with the facility? Like I mentioned, accessible to transit, downtown. It seems to tick all the boxes, but from your perspective, getting people in there as a marketer, what kind of challenges and benefits are there for BBVA?
Yeah, I think our stadium has, to your point, a number of things going forward. It is right off the rail line. It is right in the heart of downtown. We've got a really vibrant community that's grown up around it, and really we were the catalyst to bring a lot of these bars and restaurants to the neighborhood. The challenge, though, on the flip side of that coin is, I mentioned earlier, oil and gas. Houston is is a car-driven community, so being off the rail line is great, but everybody wants to drive their own car. Parking is a challenge downtown and in Edo, and we're spoiled, I guess, in Houston, courtesy of the Astrodome and everything that's come since. We're the only stadium in town that doesn't have a roof we can close when it gets hot or rainy outside. So, Houston fans are so used to that, from the Dome to NRG Stadium, Minute Maid Park across the street, that's the biggest question we get from our fans is, why don't you just put a roof on the place? We've actually done the research. It would be cheaper to tear the building down and rebuild it completely than it would be to put a roof on the existing structure. Probably unlikely to happen. But I think there's ways to work through it too, from a fan experience standpoint. I was actually on a call yesterday and trying to kind of reimagine some of the things that we've always traditionally done. We have a beer garden outside the stadium where fans can come and hang out and watch a concert and this, that, and the other. That was a fantastic idea for us in 2012 because there wasn't that much else around the stadium. Now there's handfuls of bars and restaurants that have fantastic experience of their own. So does it make sense for us to try and offer that experience, or would we be better off trying to partner with them and create more of a Wrigleyville type of environment where the bars around us are part of your game day experience? So I think for us, it's trying to kind of rethink who we are, what the experience looks like, and give people more of a reason to come than just the 2 hours between the whistles, so to speak.
James, you've got a sparkling new stadium there in Austin. I think a lot of benefits there. And some of the things that we're talking about, you are working, I think, at a bit of an advantage in that you don't have any inertia, right? The Dynamo have been in Texas for quite some time now. The Locomotive, even some of them were established. You guys, not so much. So how have you gone about sort of ginning up excitement? I think the stadium sort of plays a big role in a lot of the marketing efforts. I see a lot of drone shots. I see a lot of things on social media that make me go like, ooh, looks pretty. How has that kind of played into what you guys have tried to do here in the opening stages to life as a club?
Well, listen, I mean, we've got this shiny new stadium, so we're going to put it anywhere and everywhere we can. And listen, it's a huge part of how we get fans excited for this club, because it's unlike anything that's ever been in Austin before, right? I mean, we have UT Stadium, and it's fantastic and it's historic. This is going to be something that's an entirely different experience, and we're excited to offer it. And the pride and the investment that our core fans have had in this stadium is really impressive. I mean, they are psyched to see this thing. And when I first started Austin FC, I said, man, we're doing a lot of stadium content. Like every other post is stadium. And sure enough, over time, I came over the hump. Yeah, we should do every other post of the stadium, just based on what we're seeing from an engagement perspective, and how excited fans are around just this idea of this great asset for North American soccer to be right in their backyard in Austin. And I think we're really excited to share that, not only with Austin, but the rest of the soccer community. I think every club that has built a stadium in the last few years has had an opportunity to kind of, take ideas, take inspiration from other stadiums that they've seen throughout the league and use that to their benefit. We've absolutely done the same thing. You'll see elements that are inspired by other stadiums. But I think the biggest thing for us that's going to be a major point once we are in the position to, start the season and all that sort of stuff is this, for me, this stadium feels like Austin. We've got a canopy that goes around the entire place. It's going to keep the volume in. This is going to be a loud stadium. We actually had a couple supporters in the stadium testing out some drums last night, and I'll tell you, one drum in that stadium makes a big noise. And to have 20, 30, 50 of that in our supporters section, we're really excited to see just kind of the volume of the experience, which you guys all know. I mean, that's part of our bread and butter, that feeling when you walk into the soccer stadium in North America. Listen, I confidently believe that other sports can't really hold a candle to that in North America in terms of the environment that we're creating. And so we're excited to have that element because it feels like Austin, a little wild, a little loud, all that sort of stuff. And at the same token, the architects have done a great job to make sure that the stadium feels open. You know, it's got that sort of open canopy structure so that you don't feel like you're boxed in. The wind moves through the stadium really well, so you're going to be able to stay cool. And in a lot of ways, it feels like Austin. It's kind of got that backyard vibe to it, and that it's open and inviting, while at the same token having all the elements to really create this really loud, wild experience for soccer fans when they come through.
I want to ask you guys about the relationship with supporters groups. Sarah, you mentioned that you're able to put the most hardcore fans right behind the goal, and I think the supporters in soccer, it's so unique. You know, we're talking about comparing our sport to other sports in the U.S., and while, you know, certainly there are passionate fans for the Cowboys and Texans or the Mavericks, Spurs, UT, whatever it may be, it's very rare to see that sort of dedication to creating something during the match, but also that sort of feeling that they, you know, like the Italian history of fans saying, no, we don't want this player, or even in Spain, where, you know, like a Rayo Vallecano, they say, no, we don't like this player's political views in the past. They go to the club, they protest, they yell, and the player gets released, right? It's very rare. That would never, I don't think, ever happen in the traditional American sport. So Sarah, can you kind of tell me, first of all, what's the relationship that you foster, and do you use supporters as advocates? Are they with you kind of helping the marketing efforts, or is it sometimes more of a dealing with the criticism? Because I think often they're the most demanding fans, perhaps. So what's that relationship like, Sarah, with supporters in El Paso?
Well, I think we can all agree on this panel. It's a give and take relationship. I think there's some days where you love the relationship. Some days you're like, this is really difficult. But in the end, supporters are the bread and butter of our team. Is they're the heart and soul. If they don't like something, they're gonna make it known. And I think, you know, you can't give in to everything they say a lot of times because it's like safety and chants that aren't gonna be kid friendly, and so things like that I think are kind of hard to deal with, where you don't want to tell your capo like, hey, please stop saying that, because, you know, it's a chant that they've used multiple times and they have the whole stadium saying it. And so you have to kind of give and take with what they say, and we have a very open relationship with them. We have a very open dialogue. We started the club showing them some logo ideas, giving them having them give us feedback, and then it's gone through the jersey. I think it was this where our jersey for 2020 didn't have the logos on the back, on the little the collar, and they were like, or I think it might have been the star, and they were like, no, we really like that. We'd like that from last year. So we went back and added it, and it's little things like that that makes us El Paso, and they're from El Paso. They're passionate about it, and they want to see that in their club. And I think it's really important, like I said, to have that dialogue. One thing that happened from us is we kind of had a giveaway that went wrong, and they weren't happy about it, so they didn't cheer the whole entire match. And to not have your support, I think they even turned their jerseys inside out. So to have that happen and have fans realize what it's like to be in a stadium without supporters and without their cheering, even for us, the players, everybody, it was off. It was very off, and we spoke with them, and we tried to come up with a plan so that wouldn't happen in the future. So it is really a give and take, and it's realizing they're a very good sounding board to know if what you're doing is right, wrong, if they would like to see more of this, more of that. And I think it's an important relationship to have, and it shouldn't be a relationship that is forced, or it shouldn't be fake. It needs to be real, and it needs to have, I would say, open dialogue is really important for that.
Zach, I'm sure you've experienced some of that with the Dynamo and the Dash, kind of making sure that the hardcore fan, the person who's there every game, waving a flag, yelling, knowing the songs, knowing each player, feels welcome and feels comfortable, but also not at the expense of a fan who might be coming with their kid for the first game and doesn't want to hear a certain word, like Sarah's saying, or maybe just, there's something where the majority of the casual fan might not like something. What's that relationship like in Houston, and how is that relationship that Sarah's mentioning manifested there?
Yeah, I think Sarah made a really brilliant point that it's got to be a two-way conversation, and I think that's something we really worked very hard on as a club over the last couple of years, especially, is building more of that bridge with our supporters. And I think historically, I think there was the perception within our supporter groups that the club kind of talked at them, and we really tried hard the last couple of years to change that and make it more of a dialogue. And we've been, I think, fairly successful with that. And to your point, John, eradicating some of the chants and specific words that maybe are not welcoming to the family audience. And actually, they've been the ones, the supporter groups have been the ones that have led that initiative and kind of tried to cover up maybe some of those chants with their own lyrics to kind of change that narrative a little bit. But I think for us, it's about trying. We want to be the people's club. We want to do a better job of being the club that represents our fans, represents our community, and gives them a voice. So starting with building that dialogue with the supporters, we work with them. Historically, Houston has had kind of two main supporters groups that were in the past at odds with each other at times. And we've worked really hard with them over the last 18 months or so to bring them together, bring other supporter groups into the fold as well, and create, while they each have their own individual identities, create kind of an umbrella experience that they're working together. They're collaborating on tifos, they're collaborating on song choices, they're collaborating on travel plans and things like that to build that environment, that atmosphere that makes a soccer match so unique. I think Sarah touched on it. Soccer games, what makes us so great is it's not a scoreboard driven or PA driven experience. It's driven by the fans. And so those supporters really are the lifeblood. And we want to arm them with the ability to take their stuff to the next level. But it starts with building that conversation. And for us, it started with kind of being honest and admitting, hey, we did this wrong for a little while. Help us change it.
Yeah. Yeah, and unlike a Chihuahuas game, Sarah, there's those built-in opportunities where the marketing staff can say, okay, here's a chance to, watch a dot race and win ice cream or whatever the situation may be. The nature of soccer is that the clock doesn't stop. You don't have those opportunities. The fans should not be at the 28th minute looking up at the scoreboard to see what's going on, because they might miss a goal and you might only get one of those in the game, right? That might be the most exciting portion of the game. So it's a challenge, right? James, I think that you and Austin have been really, really intentional with bringing the supporters in from moment one. I don't want to say, are you anticipating the honeymoon period ending at some point, but how do you kind of balance the desires of the hardcore supporters with the general fan? I think that, we're listening to Sarah and Zach say, hey, it's got to be a give and take. It's got to be a conversation. I'm sure there's some of those moments that you've already had in Austin already as well. What can you tell us about the relationship there?
Well, I fully anticipate we'll never have any problems with our supporters group ever, and everything will be fine in perpetuity. No, I think, listen, we have been very, very intentional about making sure that supporters are not only featured in terms of how we present ourselves, but that they have true authorship in terms of where we're taking the direction of this club. And that's a non-negotiable from our perspective. This whole thing doesn't work if our supporters don't co-sign what this club is about. Because at the end of the day, they are as much a part of the experience and what we're delivering to the rest of the stadium as what's happening on the field. There's just no getting away from that. So we care a lot about what they think and having them involved and invested from day one. And I think I've been super impressed with just the amount of time, effort, and thought that our supporters are putting into Austin FC. I mean, these guys and girls are spending entire nights, entire weekends creating tifo, and we don't play for a few months. And they were doing that months ago. So huge credit to them to put in this sort of effort. And listen, they have good ideas, good thoughts, good opinions. They're all bona fide soccer fans. And so we've got this great invested, group that we can merchandise things with, whether it's our jersey or whether it's how we present our jersey, and I think the hope is that over time, they understand the value that we place on the supporters groups and the relationship that we're creating with them. I mean, we just launched a jersey with very little club history and called it the Legends jersey, because we're saying our supporters are the legends for this club, right, from day one. That's a big sort of messaging piece to say, yeah, supporters are part and parcel to our experience. But I think, what Zach and Sarah bring up are really important. That can't just be something that we kind of turn around and put on our channels from a marketing perspective. It's got to be built on a one-to-one relationship with these people, because we will screw up. And, sidebar, we have screwed up at times before, and we haven't even started our club yet, right? Not everybody's going to get everything perfect, but for them to understand that, hey, on our side, we're human too. We always have thesis or theories about how we want to present things. Sometimes that goes really well, sometimes it doesn't. But to have that personal relationship with the people that are really driving that is an absolute difference maker. And it's made us better as a club. I can confidently say that from even this point, before we even played a match. So it's been really cool. It's been interesting to see it grow, and it'll change over time. That's part of the nature of supporters groups and the relationship. But the hope is, from our side, is that they understand the value that we place in terms of them being so invested in our clubs so early on.
Before we start wrapping up the conversation, Zach, I wanted to ask you a potentially final question about the rebrand and why the Dynamo and Dash, why that organization, why you felt like this was the time, that this was the necessary time to kind of hit refresh a bit and give supporters a new look, a new logo. You showed it off on your chest. We can see it there. Why was this the time, and what went into crafting the rebrand for y'all's organization?
Yeah, I think as far as the timing aspect of it, it was, we looked at it, and certainly it's a long process to go from idea to execution on it. But we were going through our 15th season, and we felt like it was that kind of created a natural turning point to refresh the image of it. And certainly all the focal point falls on the crest. But the bigger thing for us really was who we are and how we represent our fans and our city more effectively. And so that was really the bigger driving force behind it, was kind of reestablishing who we want to be. I think for years, the Dynamo brand was Brian Ching, Brad Davis, Dominic Kinnear, championship trophies. And just by the nature of sports and time, all four of those things went away. And we were blessed with the ability to have a championship team from year one. But because of that, I think the process that James and Sarah both have gone through from an organizational standpoint of defining who the club is at its heart kind of got skipped over. So we needed to take the time to really identify who we are, what we stand for. And that was, like I said, what really drove the process. I'm glad you mentioned the Dash, and we haven't really talked team specific much here, but us being the only club in Texas that has a men's team and a women's team, the Dynamo came first, and then the Dash came along later. And there was always this kind of big brother, little sister perception. We wanted to elevate the women and put them on equal footing and create really a one club mentality within our own organization, and then hopefully build that out with our fans, that you're not just a Dynamo fan, you're not just a Dash fan, you're a fan of the club, and support both teams in our academy as well, for that matter. Without rambling on too long, that was really the driving force, was embracing what our identity is, planting that flag in the ground, building those pillars that we want to wrap ourselves around, so that when going back earlier in the conversation, when we reach out to a fan, they know what they're becoming a part of. Even if we may lose a game on a Saturday night, they know who we are and who they identify with, regardless of the outcome on the field.
Thanks for that perspective, Zach. I want to ask you guys what I think is the most difficult question of the day, not necessarily because of the content, but just because of the constraints I'm going to put on you as we wrap up our conversation. Can you guys give me a 2-minute answer each, 2 minutes, no more? Sarah, I want to start with you on what we're missing or what we need to add to the conversation and kind of keep thinking about for the next time we talk or the next time we think about marketing. What are we missing? What should we add about making soccer matter and making the teams relevant in their communities? Sarah, if you could give us your perspective, that'd be great.
I think as a newer club, we always talk about the fan base and our supporters and getting the fans in the stadium, connecting with the team. But I think a lot of times things that kind of, I won't say get looked over, but is community outreach. I think we try to do a really good job on that, but sometimes it's getting the players training, getting the players healthy, getting focusing on marketing in your office. And I think for us, it's really looking at how we can impact the community around us. I think we all have huge platforms that we can communicate with. And I think we have players that tell so many different stories from so many different backgrounds. And after we tell our story, I think it's really important for our players to tell their story, our fans to tell their story. I think there is a lot that soccer can do in terms of diversity and outreach and different ways that we can impact the community. And I really do think that that's something we're working on and something that I think needs to be a core pillar of a club. And I think all of us can admit that we do that, or we try to do that. We work with the community, but it's something that I think I never want to stop growing on, and I never want to stop building on.
James, 2 minutes on what we're missing or what you'd like to add to this discussion.
I mean, I think for American soccer in general, confidence is something that we need to take on in terms of how we present ourselves. This is the most exciting point that American soccer has ever seen, this point in time. And I think we need to take hold of that and not also talk about, I think, we always struggle with the general conversation around American soccer being about tomorrow. Well, let's start a conversation about today. I mean, what's happening in our stadiums around this country is amazing. Let's not be apologetic about any of that. Let's celebrate that. Let's have confidence in the brands that we're building as clubs, what we stand for, and execute against that. And I think we've got a value proposition for fans that if we do it confidently and come out of the gate and say, this is who we are, this is what we're presenting, I think fans are going to be attracted to that. And I think for the clubs that have done really well in this league and within North American soccer, the commonality is confidence and understanding who you are and not playing the chase game of we need to be this because X, Y, or Z is doing this, right? And really knowing who we are. So I think that's a huge piece. And then I would also agree with Sarah, the understanding and the thinking around community is so key. We call these teams clubs for a reason. The idea that they are a club, that they impact their community, we should take more hold of that, and not for a check the box perspective, but because we have a microphone and we need to service our communities way beyond just providing 17 match dates in a year for people to come out and maybe have a couple beers and eat some food and have a good time, but ultimately being a conduit to make our communities better. And that's something that we've tried to be focused on from the get-go, whether it's soccer related or not. We want to be a catalyst for all those things and make Austin great. And that's really what we want the Austin FC brand to be all about at the end of the day. It's beyond soccer. It's about representing Austin and all these great things that are happening in this city.
And Zach, what are we missing? What should you add?
All right, so 2 minutes is going to be a challenge for me, as you can tell. But I'm going to go back to the beginning of the conversation about I want to kind of go back to media coverage and making soccer matter in this state. There's a great radio show here in Houston, literally called Soccer Matters, hosted by Glenn Davis, that I'm sure a lot of fans have listened to. He's got a show in Austin now as well. I want to put a little bit of it on the fans too. In my role, my background is mainly communications. I've taken on more of the marketing role lately, but I talk to the media guys here in Houston all the time. I know them from my Texans days, and it's interesting to see how the conversation changes when I go to the Dynamo. But they all tell me, I wish we could do more soccer coverage. I wish we could cover you guys more. Y'all deserve more coverage. But the fact of the matter is the media is a business just like any other, and clicks, viewership ratings, listenership, that's what drives decision making. And I've had them straight up tell me, like, I wish I could do a story on you, but the fact of the matter is I can do something on what JJ Watt had for breakfast, and it's going to blow you guys out of the water from an engagement standpoint. So what we need to do as soccer fans, and I count myself as this, is engage. Give them reasons to cover us more. Click on the link, like the post, comment on it, reward them for covering. I see a lot of it's natural to complain about the lack of coverage, but when you see a reporter go out of his way to do a soccer story, even if it's not about your favorite team, comment on it, like it, retweet it. Those metrics are what drive the decision making for editors and publishers, and that's what can help us all elevate the game from a coverage standpoint.
Absolutely. We're hoping to fill some of that gap with the Striker Texas as well. For now, that's the end of our conversation. But Zach, Sarah, and James, thank you so much for your perspective today. Thank you to you, the viewer, for joining us. Make sure you stay tuned for the rest of the Texas Soccer Summit. Today, coming up next, it's Youth Girls Path to Pro, charting the course for girls soccer. Chris Bills will have a discussion with several players and commissioners of various girls academy leagues. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and we'll see you soon. Until next time, take care.